Hello, Rebel Teacher Network, and welcome back to the Talking Teaching podcast. I'm here today with Ben Liff. And Ben, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Carl?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. It's good to have you on. I'll ask you to introduce yourself in a moment, but just a quick reminder first to anybody watching, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click like down below, and I'd love to hear your comments. So as you're watching, let us know your thoughts. Ben, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what it is you're working on lately.
Sure. So I got started in education in 2007 when I moved to the city in China that no one had ever heard of named Wuhan, which I spent 2 years in. It's an amazing city. Love it. My second home. And ever since then, I just been involved in teaching, usually related to literacy or writing in some way. I got my master's of fine arts in creative nonfiction writing, my MFA at George Mason University. It's just outside of DC in Northern Virginia. I taught there for 3 years at the same time I was getting my master's. And then after that, I started teaching at a boarding school in rural Maine, where I worked primarily with international students from all over the world. And that's where I really got into kind of, I guess, like non-traditional teaching, because I was the chair of my department, my program. And so, they allowed me to develop the curriculum and programming the way I wanted to.
Nice.
Which occasionally put me into conflict with, like college counseling, because my thoughts on grades are like,
Good.
they should not necessarily be used for assessment so much as indication of like completion of work and stuff like that. But if we have to use them at all, which, obviously I'm not into. But yeah, so I did that for a few years, and then I moved on to an organization called CIEE, which is an international study abroad organization. It's one of the oldest in the world. It's a nonprofit. It's really cool. Obviously, COVID it seriously impacted international education as an industry everywhere. So when I got laid off from that, I started teaching online full time, and then one of the kind of side jobs I had always had was working with Polyphony Lit, which is the organization I work with now as the managing director. And when the managing director position opened up, I came on board full time. And one of the first things that we started to do on top of what we already do with the magazine is create this creative writing program, which is really exciting and, very much teaching focused, I guess, and creating a new kind of online course.
Good. Yeah, I'm very keen to hear more about that in particular, but something did stick out. I want to hear more about creative nonfiction. I don't think I've heard that before. What does that really mean?
So in the UK, I believe they call it life writing.
So I haven't heard that either.
Oh, so I desperately wanted to go to the University of East Anglia
because
they have a really cool life writing program, but thing about master's programs in the UK is they don't ever like give free money to American students unless you're like really, really fancy, and I'm not.
Right.
So the MFA program in the United States is one of like the largest funded programs for the arts, I think, like patronage programs for writers, because a lot of people in their master's programs at MFAs around the United States get a stipend and free tuition as long as they're teaching. Sometimes they just get fellowships. A lot of these programs are very well funded. So, that's the thing in the US. And so I ended up going to George Mason because it's one of the oldest programs in the world, or in the country, in the world, I guess. And it's also where the Association for Writers and Writing Programs, AWP, is headquartered. And so it's just like a really cool program. It's right outside of DC, which of course is a huge like arts and literary center because it's, capital of the United States. So of course. But yeah, it's basically memoir, travel writing, reportage, like I guess like literary journalism. Hunter S. Thompson would be considered, I guess, creative nonfiction writing, stuff like that. Yeah, Joan Didion.
A bit more editorial than a straight up nonfiction. Then is that the?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's creative in the sense that it uses narrative techniques that you find in fiction. Characters and protagonists and plots and unreliable narrators and all kinds of.
Right, yeah, I see. Okay. Oh, I'd never come across that phrase before. Sounds fascinating. So is that still a focus of the writing that you do now and the type of writing that you're interested in now, or have
Oh
you?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
My fiction writing is way too bizarre for anyone to really enjoy it, including me, I think. But yeah, I don't write a huge amount now just because I'm so busy with having children and professional life. But yeah, our program will have all genres, including creative nonfiction. It's the smallest of the big three, but in the MFA like graduate level world of creative writing, but it is still part of like the big three, I guess. Most schools have a creative nonfiction program, but it's smaller than fiction and poetry.
Okay, good. So tell us a little bit more then about Polyphony. What's the background? When did it get set up? And you were you there from the start, or did you join?
Oh, no,
Okay.
Polyphony is pretty old for a literary magazine. It is 16 years old. It got started in 2004 at the Latin School of Chicago, which is a very lovely independent school. I believe it's K through 12 in Chicago. And it started as like a student literary magazine there. And over the years, it got bigger and outgrew just the school. And then it became international. So today, and here in the end of 2020, we have over 300 student editors from around the world. About 20% of our students are from other countries outside the US. Um, and they're all, in high school generally or equivalent. And they run the magazine. And it's pretty amazing. It's all online now, although we are planning to start having like paper copies again at some point soon as we kind of get everything settled from my coming on board and the transition from going from paper to online only. Now we're gonna eventually have like a paper version on kind of small batch prints. But yeah, it's just this really cool organization now that's grown. We have again over 300 student staff members, and the editors in chief all the way down to the newest readers are all students.
Right.
And then we have about I think 2,000 plus submissions from high school writers all over the world every year. And we have about a 3 to 4% acceptance rate, which is not like the most selective literary magazine ever, but it's not like a high school literary magazine where half the pieces get accepted or whatever. So not to denigrate those magazines at all, but we're pretty selective and pretty high quality publication. And we have a lot of people that, will come and take a look at our writing and be like, wow, this is amazing. I know that some of our pieces that we've published have been, bought by actual publishing companies. So, we're it's a serious magazine. It just happens to be run by high school students.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Anything that empowers the students is always exciting to talk about. And this sounds like it's been a real sort of success story. So do you have themes? Do you have subjects? How does that work? And how do people submit to, or rather, how do you call for submissions?
Yeah. So we have a submission manager that we have submissions through. We're going to be probably switching to Submittable, which is a very common submission manager at some point in the next couple months. But it's pretty easy to submit. You just kind of upload your document, fill out a brief form with your biographical information so that we can contact you and submit. Our pieces are limited because the really cool thing that I didn't mention yet, being student run is awesome, but it's not the only student-run magazine by any means. There's plenty of amazing magazines out there, both academic and literary and arts magazines and other publications, zines run by students. Every single submission we get, all 2,000 of them, get detailed feedback from our student editors. That's why we call them editors instead of readers, because they're not just reading and voting. They provide like line by line feedback, general commentary. Wow. And each piece gets at least 2 to 3 people reading through it and giving edits. And then those comments are edited by our senior level editors. So it's all kinds of peer editing going on, and it's not just creative writing, it's editing of feedback. So through feedback, our staff all learn how to become better writers, because that's how you become a good writer, whether you're talking creative writing or just communicating through writing, is reading and like editing.
Sure, yeah. Right. That's really valuable. I know when I was in secondary or high school myself, I used to write poetry and mostly poetry, I suppose. I would submit and I got a few published in anthologies and things here and there. But if it either got published or it didn't, and that would be the end of the story. And you just you'd be waiting to hear. And if you heard nothing, well, then you were unlucky that time. And if it got published, then that was great. But the idea of getting feedback and the detailed kind of feedback you're talking about is that's really valuable. And it does strike me as something, I don't know if it's unique, but it certainly sounds like a pretty strong selling point.
Yeah, and it's all free. So it might not be unique, but I think the level of feedback we provide, the amount of feedback we provide, and the fact that it's all for free, you can submit as many times as you want, as many pieces as you want. I mean, within reason. There's a limit to length because we don't want 30-page stories, so it's 1,800 words or less for prose, and then poems is limited to like 1 page. But again, free feedback and good feedback. We get messages from people all the time who got rejections, who were rejected from our magazine with effusive thanks and praise.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. So how many times is it published, monthly or quarterly, or?
We have 3 issues for each volume. We have a fall, winter, and spring issue. We kind of follow like the academic calendar because our students are, believe it or not, we get most of our submissions in the spring, in May.
Okay.
Right, when all the creative writing classes have assigned their final project, and so you have these great polished pieces ready to go, but they're all at the same time. So we have this glut of submissions to read through over the summer, which of course is when the students are all on holiday.
Right.
So it's a funny.
Yeah, I mean that's a high level of commitment then from the students that are involved in the program, right?
Amazing. Our editors in chief and our senior editors, we have executive editors and genre editors, and they're all, they're basically working full-time and part-time jobs, and they do it as volunteers, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, these are great students. These are not your average students. They're the kids that are going to top colleges and working really hard. And our editor-in-chief last year is at Princeton now, so they're high-achieving students.
Yeah, sure. And so in an organization like that, the student run and obviously involves so many excellent students, what's your role? What do you do? Is it mostly administrative? How do you manage?
Yeah. So there, of course, are things that adults have to do related to the operation of a nonprofit, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States, which means we're registered with the government, and any donations to us are tax deductible and all that good stuff. And we're a charity for educational and I forget what the other one is. I'm not an expert on nonprofits, but education and charity for students, I guess. Anyway, so sorry, repeat your question because I got distracted by my.
So just, I'm interested in what your kind of day-to-day is.
Right.
Managing
so stuff, like running the website, marketing, and putting together this program for creative writing, which is kind of what I was brought on to, is to kind of expand the program because we had great success with moving our editor training course into an online format. So when we were deciding how can we both stabilize the magazine and expand the program into something more to promote literacy for teens and writing for teens, that's kind of what I was brought on for, because I have program management experience and program design and curriculum experience and stuff like that. So I also have, I probably didn't mention that well enough during my self-introduction, but because I have an MFA in creative writing, that's not like the only creative writing experience I have. I've been doing literary magazines,
right,
in one form or another since I was 15 years old.
Sure.
And then at Emerson College, where I briefly attended, I read for the Emerson Review. George Mason, I was the assistant editor for Phoebe, which is one of the oldest student-run lit mags in the country. So it's just always kind of been part of my life. So
right. Do you consider yourself a writer? Do you call yourself a writer?
That's hilarious because that discussion comes up all the time with writerly folks. Like, when is it okay to call yourself a writer? Yeah. And I don't feel comfortable calling myself a writer. I call myself an educator.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, probably about the same as when does one call oneself a podcaster? I imagine. Yeah.
When it's primary source of revenue. Like, yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
I love teaching, and I always want to work with students, and I love working with secondary school students, especially. Like, that's my preferred demographic. So a lot of my writing, because it is nonfiction, has to do with like my life, and
Right.
like many people, I've made choices in my life that are like have to do with topics that aren't necessarily what you want schools to read about.
Right.
So I
Okay.
never made an effort to get my stuff published. Like, I'm not shy talking about it, obviously. I wouldn't mention it, but without context, reading some of my essays might be like, oh, I don't know if we want this guy to, because it's something I wrote about doing when I was 17. It's like, well, I'm not 17 anymore. But
Yeah.
that's the risk of being a creative nonfiction writer, I guess, is you can't pass it off as, oh, it's just a story.
Yeah.
So,
That's one of the reasons I prefer poetry. It's easier to
yeah,
hide.
yeah, poetry and fiction, you can always say it's just the narrator.
Sorry, yeah. 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 Okay. So tell us a little bit more about the courses and the educational side of the program, then, and I gather that's going to be a main focus under you as the managing director, right?
Yeah, that's kind of one of my key focuses: curriculum design and program design. And the course, we're really like super excited about this. The pilot program is happening during our December break, and I say our because it's the U.S. Not everyone has a December break because of Christmas and New Year's holidays, although a lot of places do now, which is interesting. But anyway, so we have 9 different courses that we're offering. 3 of them are 2-hour one-time seminars, which is kind of standard discussion-based class. The students will have a couple poems or a short story to read before the class starts. Come ready to discuss it, do some writing exercises, and then we'll have 3 workshops that last the whole length from the 19th to the 30th of December, minus Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And those will be through our online platform, which is called Wet Ink. And the website address is literally wet.ink, like INK. And it's this really, really cool learning management system designed specifically for writing workshops and providing peer feedback and stuff like that. So they will have daily reading and writing exercises, and get feedback from each other and the instructors. And then our instructors we're really excited about because they are so amazing. Every single one of them is a published writer. They
Wow.
all have at least a master's degree. Most of them have experience teaching at the college and teen level. So, it's like, I don't know if there's any creative writing program for teenagers out there right
Yeah,
now.
I mean, it's certainly something I wish had been around when I was of that age. Yeah, it's and these are all available online internationally. Are they? Are they for the whole kind of network that you?
Yeah, as far as I know, like, we're learning a lot about
Yeah.
building a big program, but I believe as long as you have an international credit card, like Visa, MasterCard, that you should be able to purchase the course.
Yeah.
Internationally, the issue, of course, is time zones. We've tried to spread it out, so that we can have them available to most people. But the 3 workshops are asynchronous, right? So anyone can take those as long as they have a decent internet connection.
And are you teaching any of the courses, or are you just organizing and designing?
Yeah, I'm helping with all course design and curriculum, so I do not have time. Plus, I still teach my courses on Outschool.com a few
Oh, yeah.
times a week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll
super fun.
talk about that as well in a minute as well.
Yeah, sure.
So the magazine, I'm still interested a little bit more in how people can get involved. Obviously, you've mentioned submission, but if you want to maybe give a little bit more detail on how this is, primarily for teachers, but I would like to think there might be some students listening, or maybe teachers want to get their students involved. So if you could maybe, I don't know if you can give a little bit more detail on how the submission process works, and if there's any other way that students or I don't know, campuses, at what levels can people get involved?
So the more students, the better. We can't get enough submissions. We get 2,000 submissions every year plus, but if we could get, we would love to have a overwhelming number of submissions so that our students are constantly busy.
Right.
We also always want more editors to join. We have a 3 to 4 hour training course. It's self-paced that you can take via our website. It's on Canvas right now.
Okay.
We're going to eventually convert that over to Wet Ink, although Canvas is nice. It's not as but wet ink is literally designed for this kind of course.
Right. Yeah.
Pretty amazing. So, that is how you join us as an editorial staff member, which is, as we've described it, it's a really amazing extracurricular activity for students. It's really designed for the kind of student who has that intrinsic motivation that they want to be involved with things.
Yeah.
Right. They don't want to just be passive in their education, that they want to learn through doing stuff. They want to be involved in making decisions that actually matter.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Right.
like when I was in high school, I was yearbook editor and lit mag editor, and I was the tech theater stage manager for the play. And a lot of that is because I obviously have control issues, but the other issue is because I really like being involved in the decision-making process, because it's really fun to create. And there's more to creation than just writing or painting. It can be collaborative. So that's a really cool thing. And
I
so
think you're perhaps introducing that idea perhaps to some of the students as well, because the creative process often is romantically presented as a very kind of introspective individual pursuit, which it can be. It often for me has been, but I think it's very interesting and very valuable for someone who's really interested in following that kind of a path, to know more about how collaborative the process can be and how many people can be involved in, especially if you're going for publishing, the editing process and that whole that whole procedure of getting from the paper to a final published print. I think that's something a lot of people might not really be aware of in the early stages of writing.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of being part of a literary magazine has, to be honest, very little to do with writing. It's about working together, collaboration. I hate to be like the generic jargon, but it's 21st century skills, right? Leadership, using technology, communication skills. Like once even when you first join Polyphony as a reader, first reader, which is still an editor, you're still providing feedback, but you're immediately like having to communicate with all kinds of different students at different levels and different ages and different nationalities and backgrounds, because it's a team effort. They all have to work together. And once you get to the senior editor levels, like outside of just being a reader, you're doing all kinds of administrative work that is very rarely allowed for students to have access to, that kind of responsibility.
Yeah, true. No, that's great.
It's a really good opportunity for students.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. Being international as you are and having grown so much since its sort of its collegiate start, how do you deal with English level or English ability when you've got international writers? Is there just a kind of a barrier there to a requirement there, or do you have categories or what?
No, not at all. Especially not for writers. We provide feedback to anything that fulfills our submission requirements.
That's great.
We very often publish, especially poetry, by English learners, because the standard, like Western UK, US English, like poetry doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
And neither does prose poetry or the lyric essay. Like,
right.
If you've ever read Mother Tongue by Amy Tan, it goes all into what is broken English, which I have most of my students read that, and do a literacy narrative in my English class, my writing classes. But
that's great.
Yeah. So sorry, I got off track again. Go ahead and bring me back.
I mean, I just put in a little aside there as well, that some of my favorite fiction work in particular has been when the writing style is off kilter or non-standard. There's some, is it Pidgin English, I think, is one, and various others that just play around with the language, and I think that's it's really nice that opens up extra opportunities for people. That's really good.
Yes, one of my good friends is an English department chair at an excellent school here in the U.S., a high school, and she's a hardcore prescriptivist and, with her grammar, and I'm very much not, very much into like whatever English is made up anyway.
Yeah.
So we have lots of fun debates about
Sure,
what
yeah.
is or not. So.
Yeah, I think I've become gradually more descriptivist over time, which is I think the opposite direction that most people take. But no, it's I'm sure that's some fascinating conversations there. Okay, for these submissions, is that also accessed through the same wet ink?
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about. Sorry, the editors. So yeah, the submissions for the like poetry or fiction or nonfiction that writers are submitting, as long as it's in English, we'll read it, give feedback. Becoming an editor does generally require kind of a minimum English proficiency level. We don't have by any means a minimum standard because that would be kind of ridiculous, I think, because even if someone were to have a relatively low proficiency level, they can still read a poem and provide feedback.
Yeah,
right.
They can have thoughts and they can have opinions, right?
Yeah, it turns out that not speaking English does not have anything to do with your ability to think.
Yeah.
So, once they've reached like, if they want to participate, we're not going to say no. If they're not able to give kind of actionable, useful feedback, that's a different story. But I don't think we've had that issue. We have that training course that one of the really cool things about the training course is we have our TAs or editors or recently graduated editors who are first year college students or taking a gap year, and they work part-time to like give feedback to the students going through the training course.
Right.
Like once or twice in the last year, we've had a student who like either thought it was a joke and didn't really do the feedback properly as on the final like test, or didn't really understand. And our TAs have gone and explained it to them, and they go and do it again, and it's fine.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
So
these courses that you've mentioned, you've got obviously some a good selection of tutors from that you've already described. Their writing backgrounds. Is there any opportunity at the moment, or will there be for the student editors to deliver any courses or any training or anything like that?
That is a fantastic question, and it is aligned with another very common question that we get, which is, are you going to offer courses for middle school students or elementary school students, primary school students? And the answer is maybe.
Okay.
And maybe we will have our current editors, especially like juniors and seniors in high school, 11th, 12th grade, maybe participate as TAs.
Yeah, right.
In the current courses, and definitely perhaps offer their own courses. We're also considering kind of like a reading club type of course, which would be low stakes, low effort. Come like read the story, come to class once a week, ready to talk about it, just like a reading club, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, sounds good.
Lots of different entry points for students depending on their interests, their schedules, their ability to pay for classes. We have financial aid, not a huge amount, but we're hoping to build a fund and grow that financial aid fund so that we can offer courses to anyone who wants to take them. Can't do that yet, but we can offer some. So working on it.
Good. And when the courses that you have planned, when will they be running?
So we have our December pilot program starting on December 19th to the 30th, and we have our 6 workshops from like the 20th. It's on the website, which will be published very shortly. And then the 3 workshops run the whole 11 days minus Christmas Eve. I guess it's really 9 days or 10 days, but yeah, minus Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. There's new content each day to work on, and instructors give feedback on all student submissions, and they love giving feedback. So it's like every single person I've talked to is like, I wish we had that when I was in high school.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That sounds great.
And our courses are fun. They're not, I don't want to say boring. It's not about being boring, but they're not generic. They have specific fun topics. We have zoo poetics course, which is poetry, via the animal kingdom, like animal inspired poetry. We have flash fiction courses. We have hybrid poetry courses. We have stuff focused on like music videos and how they use words and images to tell a story. So all kinds of fun stuff. It's not just how to write a piece of fiction or how to get published.
It sounds really interesting. It's something I say. I hope if we've got students that are listening now, they'll want to get involved. But if teachers that we've got listening and following will hopefully be able to share this with their students as well, because it does sound like something quite different, quite interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the Outschool stuff as well that you do. Yeah. But I wonder if just to close this off, you can give any broad strokes advice to budding writers, apart from submitting to the Polyphony Lit magazine, sure. Obviously they should do. What would be your kind of your starting point, broad strokes advice for people who are just getting into or interested in writing?
Sure. Well, anyone who's interested in writing at any level of experience should, definitely submit your writing to Polyphony if you have anything you'd like to get published or just want feedback on. And then how do you become a good writer, or how do you become a better writer? Well, joining Polyphony Lit as an editor is great because it gives you access to all kinds of feedback, lessons, and how to be a good editor, and then you are reading good writing. But you're also part of this international literary community, writing community, and that gives you access to all kinds of resources. And a lot of people think of writing as this solitary activity where you sit in a room and navel gaze, which is true. Like, there's a lot of navel gazing, especially in creative nonfiction. But it's also collaborative. It's really rare for there to be an Emily Dickinson out there who sits there and comes up with masterpiece after masterpiece without any outside interaction with other humans, right? It's art is about connection and communication generally.
Yeah.
At least becoming a good artist. So that's my recommendation is like read and write a lot, become part of the community. And then B is embrace the process.
Yeah.
Because one thing that a lot of writers struggle with, and this is not just creative writing, but academic writing, is the kind of one and done, like it's on the page, what else can I do?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is you can revise it and revise it again, and then go back and revise it yet again. I'm the crazy person that paid for Grammarly Premium, and then I revise my emails to like my mother, like she cares.
Yeah.
Right. But I still do it for everything I write because I'm like that. That doesn't mean everyone should be quite as paranoid as I am about making errors in their writing. But when you're writing something for other people, for an audience, whether it's an essay or a short story or a piece of nonfiction, you want it to be good, and you don't want it to look like you didn't try.
Right.
And that means you have to go through and edit and revise and do it again and again. And I always tell my students when I was writing my master's thesis at George Mason, I literally recorded myself reading the entire, this was like well over 100 pages, right? I recorded myself reading the entire thing out loud, listened to myself reading it out loud while I read through it and like making changes, because your brain sees what you meant to write.
Yeah.
And it doesn't see what you actually wrote. And so that's why
it's a fascinating problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why feedback and collaboration, having writing groups and stuff like that is so useful and necessary to becoming a good writer.
Yeah, no, some really good points there. The value of community, I think, is something I think a lot of people perhaps are beginning to recognize that, ironically, more in these last few months where we've all been so isolated. Certainly for me, I have identified the value of community as a global thing where, I didn't have much of a community locally and just sort of thought, well, that's the end of that story. And then the lockdown conditions that we've all pretty much all been facing for the past few months pushed me to reach out around the world, and I have more of a community now, and obviously the Rebel Teacher Network that this podcast is on, and that's one of those examples. And for something like writing as well, and creative arts in general, I think recognizing the value of a community and the collaborative possibilities can be quite valuable, I think, because otherwise you can you can miss out on the feedback and all of the things that you've just suggested as well. And also you can kind of spiral down into rabbit holes that you might need a collaborator to pull you back out of. So I think that the community aspect there can be really useful. And also, it's helpful to remember that it's about the reader, right? You've just, you said you want it to be good, you want it to look like you've tried, you want to make an effort. You also want it to connect with the reader. And if you don't have outside input, it can sometimes be easy to be very happy with the work that you've done, and then later find out that nobody else is connecting with it. So I think that community is really, really important. And the other thing you said as well, writing is, and again, the creative arts in general are considered productive practices, which of course they are, but the value of consumption, the value of reading and consuming material and getting input from other sources, I think is another thing that's overlooked. So no, I definitely agree with those massively. Brilliant. So tell us a little bit about the Outschooling, because I've seen it around. I haven't done it, I haven't engaged with it, but I know you've been quite active there. So tell us a little bit about what you do on Outschooling and why you like it so much.
Outschool is a really interesting program, and platform. They allow for teachers to teach pretty much anything they want within reason. For, I believe it's ages 3 through 18. So pretty much pre-K through 12. And it's everything, right? It's arts, it's language, it's cooking, it's video games. There's some really cool courses about stuff like the mythology of the Legend of Zelda. Right?
Okay.
So, or explaining different flowers, like identifying the flowers in Animal Crossing, stuff like that. So there's really cool courses. I generally teach history classes. I got my bachelor's degree is actually in history.
Okay.
But yeah, so I teach history courses. I used to teach a couple of creative writing and literature courses, but Outschool is not really the best platform for my style of creative writing. So that's kind of why I'm creating my own program, because I want to teach online creative writing the way I want to teach it.
Yeah.
But it's a really, really cool platform for lots of other stuff, and especially for younger kids. I know that that's kind of their bread and butter is the probably 5 to 12-year-old demographic.
Okay.
So anything else I can address or talk
about? I think we've covered it. So before we sign off, do tell us, just as a final reminder, make sure people know where to get you. I think you said some things haven't been published yet, so there'll be links and things underneath the video. Anybody who's watching, do check out the links at the bottom. And if there's anything that's not there now at the time of recording, Ben, you can send them to me when they're ready for publication. I'll add them. So I know you've got Polyphony Lit has a Twitter. So where can people find you and the magazine?
Well, I would much rather people check out the magazine than me. Like I was talking to you before before you started recording. I'm not much for self-promotion, but polyphonylit.org. We we always welcome students or educators. We'd love to connect with schools or independent teachers, English departments, creative writing programs, anyone like that. We want to be a resource and a community. We're not trying to be a candle in the wind, just standing here on our own. We want to be growing the international writing community, especially for teens, because especially now, like, they're really struggling, and there's not a whole lot of resources for them. They have what's going on with schools. It's just like, what are they going to do this spring? So we can't help everybody, but there's a lot of kids out there, I think, who would love to be involved in a creative writing program like this and become part of this community. So that is my request, is that people check out our magazine, they consider joining as a staff member, and they hopefully will register for some of our online courses, because they're going to be super fun and amazing.
Yes.
Best online creative writing courses for high school students in the world. That's what I'm telling you right now.
It sounds like that must be true. Fantastic. As I say, I think we'll probably have more teachers listening. So for teachers that are listening, do share this with your students and with your colleagues, because it sounds like a real valuable resource, something that's not a lot of out there for kids of this age, I think. So yeah, share this with whoever needs to see it. And thanks a lot, Ben. It's been a real pleasure. I'm really interested to see how these courses go and how the magazine continues to develop. And anybody who's watching, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below. If you have any questions for Ben, put them in the comments, and we'll get him to respond. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Carl. It was a pleasure.